Okay, it looks like we're here. Hi, my name is Hillel from New Hero Comics, and I'm here with Brian. Brian from
Good evening, afternoon.
Kazoo Palamu. Where are you from?
I'm in Michigan here. I've kind of moved all over, so
Right.
I'm from the wonderful state of Michigan.
I don't know. I keep playing with the city name. I think it's a fun name. But tonight we're going to talk about the Flash and the Arrow TV shows, and I don't know how much people are enjoying those. The CW, DC universes. We're not doing Supergirl or all the other ones that they've done. These two were the first two shows. Arrow was first, and Flash followed it. I super enjoyed the first season of both a lot. But about the third season, I stopped watching both shows. So I got to about season 3, and I stopped watching Arrow, and I stopped watching Flash. I just didn't enjoy them after that. And I don't know what your thoughts were. Have you kept up with them at all?
So I did finish the Flash, but kind of like you, around the 4th season of Arrow, I kind of tapped out and kind of lost some steam for me. Believe it or not, I've got my wife kind of pumped on comics lately. Introduced her to a lot of different comics. She's not really big into superheroes. She likes some of the crime, mystery, and horror.
Sure.
So I said, Arrowverse is not terrible. The Arrow isn't terrible. Let's restart it. So I recently restarted. I loved the first season. Thought it was a very great offering for a lot of reasons we can go into. Flash, so the overall theme for me is this idea of entertainment versus like continuity, with the actual comic characters. And if you can kind of divorce the actual, comic book canon, if you will, from the entertainment value of the shows, I think you can get a lot more out of the shows and realize this is just an offering based upon the characters, a possibility of the characters, and not necessarily the actual events as they were represented, on print, in print. But I really enjoyed the Arrowverse overall. Flash and Arrow, both of them. For me, it was about the tone and like the tenor of the shows. Arrow was like the comic was always kind of dark, gritty, embedded in criminal activity, and maybe some women problems on the side, which has kind of reflected itself in the Arrow show. And then Flash was always a bit more lighthearted and playful, and really played on the idea of time travel and the Speed Force. And I think those tones, those atmospheres, were able to carry over to the TV shows.
Well, let me just say that personally, I've never liked the Green Arrow as a comic book character. I never read the Green Arrow comics. I just couldn't get into them. And same thing with Hawkeye, even less. There's just something about having a bow and arrow. I don't know. I just can't get into it.
Right.
And but the show, I love the show. Actually, that I became a fan of the Green Arrow based on the show. Of course, they made it much more like Batman, but made it much more intense and more interesting. He had a more interesting backstory. The first season of Arrow, I loved it. First season of Flash for sure was awesome. It was almost like, I can't wait to see what happens. What's the for Flash, the first season was you knew that you had the Reverse Flash. What's the story with Harrison Wells, and Eobard Thorne and all that, and you had to make it through the season to find all that out. I felt like they sort of got trapped with the Harrison Wells character to where it became a little repetitive every season. There were some things I like. I like the version of Harrison, the one with the drumsticks.
That was great.
I thought he was kind of fun. He was a lot of fun. I don't know what happened to him because I never finished the season with him. I just lost interest in it. One other criticism I have with it was the villains were always speedsters, and I would have enjoyed a different kind of villain for him, like his power, his problems. I have to go faster and faster. that's what he thinks. And I would really like to have seen him go up to somebody who speed is not his problem, it's something else. And going faster won't necessarily help him. I would like to have seen a different kind of challenge for him. One of perhaps like, just a different power set that he's going against. I'm never super big fan of regular humans taking on superpowered individuals, unless it's Batman. Then, of course, the game's always fixed for him.
Right.
Here's my big issues with both shows. Two different issues. It's funny, but the Arrow, what I got tired about is that they wanted to reform the Arrow from he was a person who was willing to take lives and do whatever it took to get the job done. They wanted to make him into more of a hero. So theoretically, I'm in favor of that. But it just turned into like every episode was like a guilt trip.
Yeah.
And and that his eventually Felicity, who initially was a great character, she was a fun character, but I got to the point where I didn't like her anymore. I think when the two of them started dating, I stopped liking her for some reason. But I felt like everything was just like it went from being like dark and gritty to emo, right? Everybody's just depressed, and I just didn't enjoy that. I didn't enjoy this. Just we're depressed. We're oppressively depressed, and there are times when, and this will go more into the Flash, but I don't like these. They have this tendency with comic book TV shows or movies or whatever, where the female character says, I don't want there to be any secrets between us ever, right? And if there's a secret between us, that's it. I can't take it, right? That's one trope I don't like. The second trope is I'm lying to protect you. I'm lying to protect you trope, right? And if they were going to go with that, don't make it so predictable that they're going to regret it. Like maybe it would be nice that it actually worked out. I'm not telling you all the truth because, why do you really need to know? You don't have any superpowers. And I think the hero should have had more of an attitude about like, in this area, I don't think your opinion really matters. I am a professional superhero. I risk my life at least once a week. I think I understand the situation better than you do. So I have that trope kind of plays throughout both shows. The thing I disliked the most that really got to me about Flash, the thing I just made it. I finally said I can't take this show anymore. Was they're in their war room and they're talking about we got to fight the bad guy and here's the problem, yada yada yada. Okay, everybody, you have your tasks. Let's break. People break up and then someone decides to walk out into the little hallway out there, and then immediately someone else follows them, and they have to have a heart-to-heart discussion.
Oh yeah. Every time.
Man, how you doing? Hey, I was just thinking that, and it's just like, and then someone starts crying, usually Barry or Joe. Those two are just like turning on the water, especially Joe.
Yeah.
I remember when he was on Law and Order. He played a cop on Law and Order. That dude would cry all the time on that show too. I think that's just how he acts. He just says, I don't know what to do in this situation, so my character will cry. I don't know, other than that, I don't really understand what's going on with them. So I really got sick of the heart-to-hearts in the hallway. And the heart-to-hearts were always just, in the end, ridiculous. And I don't know. There was too much crying in Flash, and there was too much depression in Arrow. Whereas I think it should have been more like the first season. Like, I don't like what I'm doing, but I have to be willing to do some of these things, because the city is in turmoil. And the fact that he was initially willing to kill was interesting. Making the switch over to not killing people could have also been more interesting than it turned out to be. If they'd handled it a little bit better, it would have been a lot more interesting. And I think I might have stuck around for the show. The League of Shadows were okay. I got excited. So I kept getting excited about characters and then let down. And that was my my problem with Arrow.
I think it's a good way to segue. I think your points are valid. I wonder if it's not the inherent in the medium. That is, the comic books, the title is Green Arrow, the title is The Flash, and both of those characters drive the story. They're the main, attraction, and they carry the story. With the TV shows, they really, both of them had to create this supporting cast and really draw them in to each scenario, like through the hallway, heart to hearts, which got very predictable. Absolutely. And the same thing with the Arrow. They really tried to draw this supporting cast together, where both of these characters, as I understood them in comic books, were somewhat solo acts. Yes, they had team ups. Right. Yes, they had Black Canary, of course, with Arrow and the Huntress occasionally. Of course, there were team ups. Of course, there were alliances, 100%. But initially, they were somewhat solo artists versus the TV shows where they really worked hard to create a supporting cast and all the pitfalls that come with that. Like you're mentioning, Joe. I thought he was a great actor in that he was able to display a range of emotions. I really liked his overall character.
But I do like him overall. Too much crying.
Yeah, overall, I did. But that it was a strange plot device to have him, that is Barry, placed within the home of Iris, and that whole dynamic got a little, interesting.
Weird.
Yeah. I guess what I'm just saying is just I think with the medium of TV, they really wanted a supporting cast, which led to some difficulties, some continuity issues. Versus the comic, which is just the main thrust is that character. So I think it's much more easy to stay on task.
I don't mind a supporting cast. I think they're good. No. I think it helps develop the character, right? And leads to character growth. I liked Cisco.
He was great.
Caitlin's always been a little blah for me. And as far as Killer Frost, I never have for 1 second believed her as being Killer Frost. She's never been intimidating in any way. As Killer Frost, she's been more like all talk, no kill.
Right.
She's okay. I don't know. She's not my favorite. But I liked Cisco a lot. I didn't like Cisco at first when they introduced him in the Arrow, right? And the Arrow, I didn't really enjoy him. I thought, I don't know, this guy. But then his sense of humor was really well written, and Absolutely. They had some development for him. The other thing I dislike is that in the shows, everyone ends up becoming a superhero. If Green Arrow or Barry makes friends with somebody, next thing you know, they're putting on a helmet and going into battle, and they become a superhero. Right. Even Iris, who was never a superhero in the comics, they decided, well, we don't know what to do with her. We'll just give her a mask and give her super speed. Super speed is very easy to come by in the Flash TV show. Same way with Ollie, people become a superhero, supervillain, everybody that he knows. I think that's a very strange thing to do. I think you could have made them more interesting. I thought Gotham did a pretty good job of course, nobody was a superhero in that sense. There were supervillains, but there weren't really any superheroes. I think that Gotham did a little bit better job of dealing with non-superheroes. And they could have had a more interesting role. Like, Joe could, look, I really like the actor who plays Joe. I just don't like him crying so much.
Yeah.
And I always feel like they were it's like a crutch or something. Like, I appreciate when a character can express it, when an actor can express emotions and it can be meaningful and add to the plot, but I don't like it when it's too much. And it really took away from, you go from The Office, they have the character Andy Bernard, right? And everybody goes, I hear you cry really easily, right? And so his character became kind of this crybaby. Well, that's what Joe kind of becomes on the show. He becomes a crybaby. But they have a lot of tropes. Oh, and the trope I hate the most is I've got to get my mask off as quickly as possible, because the actor's face has to be seen. And I really dislike that. You get the same problem in like Boba Fett and other, anything that's got anybody with a mask or a helmet on, They have got to get that sucker off as fast as they possibly can.
Yeah.
I also dislike the fact that with Flash, they used to have where he would vibrate his image and oscillate his voice, and you couldn't tell who he was. And it's really too bad that they abandoned that after. I think they stopped doing it after the first season. Yeah. And I thought that was great because they had that with Superman in the Man of Steel series. Because the question is, well, how do you hide your identity with a pair of glasses? Well, so Man of Steel with John Byrne, who wrote that, I think it was 85, it was right after Crisis. He explains it. Superman vibrates his face. So even with computer technology, you can't put his face back together. And
it's a great idea.
In that case, glasses are fine. That's all you need is glasses. And I would really, I really would have liked to have seen them do some more clever things with Arrow. The first season of Heroes comes to mind, where people are very normal interacting with these super normal powers. And it was a great show, but it was based a little more in reality. And I think the Arrow would have been more interesting if it turned out he's just exceptionally good at fighter, but he's surrounded in these extraordinary situations. It's almost too much for a normal person to handle, but because of his cleverness and his wits, he handles it. That would have been more interesting for the show. But like the Flash, everybody's got an arrow suddenly. Suddenly, archery is no problem to learn. I can just I picked up an arrow now. Oh, look at that. I'm hitting bullseyes one after another. And it's Arrow and Flash, they have so many more rogues you could go through.
That's always my my problem. I'm a big fan of Cobra Kai, the TV series based on the Karate Kid movies. And I'm always as a martial artist myself, I'm always down on people learning martial arts, and one summer all of a sudden they're doing flips and amazing things, and they can just pick up these techniques and that take years to perfect or whatever. And I think it's it's TV, it's entertainment. But I tell you who I did like was Captain Cold. I loved.
Sure.
I was hoping they were gonna go the Rogues Gallery route.
Oh, I was too.
Flash. Yes. They introduced, I think, the Trickster, Mirror Master. They had Golden Glider, but I loved Captain Cold. He has such a calculated personality, and I thought that was a fantastic version of Captain Cold. And I was really hoping, in the initial phases of Flash, they would really go the Rogues Gallery route, because I feel that would be more true. I mean, they didn't introduce the Turtle, but I feel like they killed him off in one episode, which is terrible because later on in comics, similar to the Green Lantern, how they did the emotional electromagnetic spectrum, being other cores, in addition to Green Lantern, they ended up doing the Still Force, the Speed Force, the Strength Force, the Sage Force, and multiplying the forces, which made for some great comics, really awesome interplay. Sure. But for me, the Rogues Gallery, I think, is the heart, and the soul of the Flash 100%. Dynamic.
100%. And Captain, you're right. Captain Cold they cast for the Flash was great, and I love the fact that Barry he figured out who the Flash was very quickly. And Barry, when he started threatening the Flash, he says, "Look, I'm not going to take your threats." He says, "You run around and you think you're so smart, right?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm the best." Mm-hmm. He goes, "Then why don't you try committing your crimes without killing people? That will impress me." And he said, "Challenge accepted." And that was great. That was so. And then they put him on that stupid Legends TV show.
Yeah.
And him and both he and Heatwave. And it was such a waste.
Yeah.
Yeah. And both of those guys
really embraced that.
Both those guys were from Prison Break. That's where they started together, and that as brothers. Yeah. And they had a great dynamic between them. Roy was hothead, didn't think things through, and then Captain Cold cooled him down, very rational, and it was they had a great chemistry between the two of them. Absolutely. And I could just see those two guys and the other rogues plotting against the Flash and coming up with some amazing situations, because each of them on their own can be a challenge for the Flash, but together they make up for each other's weaknesses. And I don't know. I think more clever writing would have gone a lot further. And that's one of the things. I think there's a lot of lazy writing, and I think that there's a bad guy of the week. There is an overall plot that gets less and less interesting because more or less it's the same plot from the first season. They just kind of move it around a little bit, It's some speedster who Flash has to get faster than, and that's the whole that ends up being the whole story.
I feel like they almost fell into the pitfall of say the Marvel movies, who created these just amazingly earth-shattering events, and they want to pull all the people together to solve this problem, like Endgame or Civil War or some of these fun ideas. And it got to be like Flash got to be these huge events, that they'd be leading up for 4 or 5 episodes, and then boom, it was over in a 20-minute fix. Flash just ran faster and solved it all,
Right, we're going fast enough. Now, I did enjoy the crossovers between the shows.
Yeah,
and when they
nice.
Initially did Supergirl, she was part of a different universe. It was kind of fun. I wasn't a big fan of the Supergirl show. I stopped watching it almost immediately. I just couldn't get into it. And they had, and like Legends, they had too much lesbianism in it. And I understand that you have a variety of different types of people with different beliefs and different ways of being, but it just becomes a little oppressive when it's constantly.
Yeah.
People don't have regular relationships, but but Legends, I very quickly got tired of. I love the stint when they met the JSA. They definitely chose some JSA members. I don't think that I was super. And Vixen was never a member of the JSA. She was always a Justice Leaguer. But I don't know why they chose her to be part of the JSA. It was interesting. I like the way the JSA is represented more in Stargirl. And I have things I like and dislike about Stargirl. And I don't know, maybe we can talk about that show sometime. But I like that they brought the 90s flashback into the series. First as his dad, and then as Jay Garrick.
Mm-hmm.
And then during the Crisis crossover, he got to play 90s Flash. And I guess after his season, I think the 90s Flash was only like one season. I was in junior high, I think, when that came out. Remember, I couldn't watch it initially on I missed a lot of the episodes as a kid because I was playing 7th, 8th grade football. But I guess after the series ended, suddenly lots of people with superpowers popped up because when the Monitor came to his world, there were lots of different types of heroes there. I would have loved to see more of the 90s Flash.
Yeah.
But now they've got him as Jay Garrick, and that's great because Jay Garrick is supposed to be an older man, more experienced, and I did enjoy his character on the show.
Yeah, I did too.
A lot,
I didn't like him recasting him as Zoom instead of the traditional Hunter Zolomon. It was actually, I believe, a Wally. He was the nemesis of Wally West and not Barry Allen. There was a lot of fusion.
Who was?
That is Zoom.
Oh, Zoom.
It came
the
later.
Wally West Flash, right?
Yeah.
Right. Because he didn't really have Speed Force powers. His was something weird. I don't remember exactly what it was, but his powers worked differently. It just appeared he had super speed, but it was something else. He didn't have super speed.
Yeah, in the TV series, he was taking injections, some speed formula. So it didn't
Jesse
come
Quick's speed formula. Jesse Quick's speed formula.
Yeah.
I think. Which in the comics was he just said the formula out loud, and then he had super speed.
That's right.
He was in All-Star Squadron. I don't know if you ever read that. I love the All-Star Squadron. I think Jerry Ordway was the writer on that. Or was he the artist? I don't remember. But that was a great series. All-Star Squadron followed the heroes of the 40s around World War II. And this was, of course, DC. The characters in it were all the characters that DC had acquired over the years, the Charlton characters and all the other ones. So the Marvel family, I think, were they in it? I think they were in the I think they were in the All-Star Squadron. But they had lots of heroes from that. Liberty Bell. I don't think Liberty Bell or Jesse Quick were initially part of the DC universe. But at any rate, one thing I was disappointed about the Arrow was that Black Canary.
Yeah.
I was disappointed in a lot of things with Black Canary. I was really disappointed that they never developed the relationship with Black Canary like it had in the comics. I enjoyed that relationship more because she was really Black Canary in the comics is someone who could stand toe to toe with Oliver.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she was
great character.
Every bit is matched. Yeah, she's a great character. And the Black Canaries, they've had like 3 or 4 of them, I think, at this point. And the first one, who became White Canary, I don't know. I wasn't super fond of her. She was okay on Legends of Tomorrow. I don't know. But the second one was her sister. And again, it's one of those things where she was trained as a lawyer, not as a fighter. So, what makes her think that she can go out there and throw down with everyone? I think she had a device that allowed her to do the noise or something like that.
Yeah.
But, and I wasn't super fond of her. And it just seemed like if I put on a costume, I could be a superhero. And then everyone was like, oh, I remember, who was it? It was Cisco. Cisco came, oh, you're the Black Canary. And it was like going, I don't know.
Yeah.
Was she really that impressive? I didn't think she was that impressive. And would anybody know about her? How would they know about her? These are heroes who work in the dark. I don't quite get that.
Right.
And I don't know. The third one was evil, right? Or she was evil and she became good or something. I don't remember. See, I saw an episode here and there after I stopped watching it. I kept trying to get back into it. Netflix has them for free. So every now and then if I get bored, I go, let me try it. And I go, I can't do it. They messed up Savitar. The original Savitar from the comics.
I was going to mention that.
Go ahead. What do you guys say?
Oh, that was, what was that? Oh, man. There was a series called, I think, Dead Heat. Mid-90s, where Savitar was the premier kind of deal. Yeah, villain. That was a very fun.
Awesome, the comic.
Yeah, it was a very fun and engaging series where Savitar was in the TV series. I don't know. I just don't feel like they handled. Had it been a different character and they did it that way, it might have been great. But the Savitar character itself, it just felt a little forced, maybe. Savitar character is fantastic. This idea of the Hindu god and the cult that forms and the Speed
he was
Force,
interesting because he was an expert in the Speed Force, and up until that point, this is where I think it was through Savitar they introduced the Speed Force.
I think that's right.
Because at that time they had Max Mercury, who was training Impulse at the time, Wally West was the Flash. And suddenly, Max Mercury understood a little bit more about the Speed Force, but he was a noob compared to Savitar. And so he was even struggling a lot with dealing with Savitar's threat.
Right.
And then
they really developed the Speed Force quite a bit during Terminal Velocity. I think it was second series on Flash, leading up to issue 100. They had Johnny Quick, Jesse Quick. Max Mercury,
all the speedsters,
all the speedsters, Jay Garrick, all of them were kind of coming together to really, for me in comics, that's when they really defined and engaged with the Speed Force in a real, demonstrable way.
Yeah, and Savitar, who had his speed ninjas, which was cool. That was really awesome.
Yeah,
the speed ninjas I liked, and then he could take away Speedster's powers. And actually, one of the Speedsters died because he took away. He was running up a building, and he took away his power, and he fell. And I thought, wow, that's how do you fight a character like that? And that's the one thing that I think that they miss out on is there's no suspense. Can they really? I know they get grim with this kind of stuff, but it's almost like it's coming. The play is telegraphed in the TV show.
Yeah.
You're never caught by surprise. Sometimes it's because you hear the actors off the show and you go, well, they're going to get rid of them somehow, and so there's usually no, you can usually predict what's going on. I liked Elongated Man.
Yeah. That was nice comic relief.
He got removed because he made the wrong comment somewhere. I think I don't remember what he said.
I heard that.
Yeah,
terrible.
I don't know what he said, but he lost his place in the show. But he was a great addition.
One thing I didn't, as a criticism, initially I didn't like the look of the Flash. Typically, Barry had blonde hair in most times, and Grant Gustin didn't, and then same thing with Arrow. He was always a kind of a wild man, with a goatee and very blonde hair. Right. And neither one of those characters, are very blonde. But I was able to get over that. Like I said, it kind of breaks the continuity of the character, but it did the entertainment value, some of the other features. Although I did like the fight sequences. In the Arrow, I thought they were some of them were very well choreographed and thought out, and some more than others, of course. But there were some very nice fight sequences, and as a martial artist, I really appreciated some of the thought put into that.
Yeah, I can't judge these things based on martial art. I'll tell you my overarching problem I have with the martial arts stuff is when they have women fighting, especially with swords and things like that. Like, I usually don't find it very convincing. There are very few women in comic book TV shows where I find it convincing that they could actually do the things they're doing. Like, I know it's a double standard. You're dealing with superheroes, but I'm talking about more of the non-powered heroes. Like,
right.
Again, going back to Black Canary and others, when they fight, they look extremely awkward. And they telegraph their punches and their kicks and everything like
Absolutely.
that. You can just tell, based on my less than 1 year experience in Taekwondo, I can tell these things.
Yeah.
So
it's always my criticism with the martial artists.
Right.
It's like the first Black Canary, which was, Laura Lance's sister, Sarah, she, just through a couple little, moments, all of a sudden she's this master of martial arts and the League of Assassins and League of Shadows and all these things. And it just, you would build an athletic build. There'd be a certain athleticism involved in that.
Sure.
That is derived from hard work and not just some situations that force you to make, hard decisions.
They tried to establish the second Black Canary had some fighting training in her background. I think her father or something like that.
Yeah.
But look, Arrow was well trained. They established he spent 5 years training on the island, and the training that he was involved with was he had Deathstroke trained him. He had
right.
the Asian girl, the Chinese girl.
Yeah,
she trained
it was believable.
him, and then it was far more believable. He had to learn these skills to survive, and
right.
It was a constant game of him trying to survive on the island against well-trained military types. He went from being a rich playboy who didn't know anything to somebody who was able to survive, and just barely. And that was a really interesting growth period. But then suddenly Black Canary can fight magically. I do want to go back to your statement about the Karate Kid. That was the one thing that I was laughed about, that Miyagi was able to get Daniel-san in shape in like a month, I think it was. And he's fighting Johnny Lawrence, who's been training for like years, He's been training for years, and it's like, he has that crane kick, and that's what does the trick. I always tell my son,
it's just not believable.
Correctly, no can. And then of course the second movie, he blocked it. But it was, so anyway, I always laugh at those little training montages, and you go, really? I mean, did the other guy's martial arts just really suck that bad? Like, was it such a that bad that you can take this noob and he can suddenly, fight? I mean, fighting you have to develop sort of a sense for fighting. You can start reading people's movements and things like that. It's not something you can just pick up instantly. You've got to have the experience of getting hit and avoiding and absorbing and all that. And you have to suspend so much belief. Like I really wish that what we were suspending our belief on was more the powers and less on everything else. Like I really want an extremely intelligent character like Captain Cold to come in and pick these heroes apart, where and level the playing field where their powers don't mean anything.
Right.
Critique I have of superheroes in general is that just because you have a superpower doesn't make you invincible. Cyclops can be ended with a bullet. He's not invincible. And I would wear armor of some sort. I always have this critique in a universe where Iron Man exists. I think, if I were Xavier, I'd go, oh, you think you can make some X-Men suits for us, and or Forge. Forge has that capability, and Forge's mutant power is technology.
That's where I could put in a plug for the last iteration of X-Men through Jonathan Hickman. He found a way for the teams of mutants to work in tandem. They all work together, so their powers kind of made up for each other. And they had team plans that they built a little bit. It was more integrated, so it would make up for some of those vulnerabilities. And real quick, in comparison comics to the TVs and even the movies, one thing I think comic book enthusiasts really enjoy is the internal dialogue of the hero or heroine, that you're able to see inside their heads, hear their voices, hear their jokes, their frustrations, and it becomes almost a narrating force a lot of times through the comic book. And that's one thing I do miss in the TV shows is I don't get to see some of the internal dialogue. It's displayed through the actions, of course, and through the goings on, but you don't get to hear as much as the internal conflict of the heroes. And I think, I don't know how that would transfer, but certainly something I miss.
Yeah, that's really hard. But the benefit is if you have, they have to do that because in the comics, you would never understand that from the pictures. And so they have to display that. But if you have a good director and you have good acting, then I think you can put that out there with the character's expressions and how he handles things and whatever else. But you could have the fact that every episode of The Flash starts off with him going, I'm Barry Allen, fastest man alive, yada yada yada. There's no reason he couldn't have these thoughts to himself. But it could get strange or repetitive if you didn't do it correctly. But if you did it correctly, it could be interesting.
Yeah.
But they have different devices for that they use. They use different characters to explain things, and maybe that's part of what the whole meeting in the hallways was about, was to give the internal dialogue a little bit. But I just think that's just a waste of time. I don't like how they conduct relationships in the comic book TV shows. Comics in general, I've never liked how they've done relationships, but the reason for that is that they don't want their characters getting married and having kids and having families. Too much change. They've done it a few times. Wonder Girl got married to Terry. I hated that character.
Titans.
I never got Terry. I never understood what she thought was so. They never conveyed why Terry was so awesome. He just seemed like this kind of Bob Ross hippie kind of guy, and I think they had a daughter together, and then I think after Crisis on Infinite Earth, I think all that gets erased, and they never mention it again. They don't do the relationship. The relationships are so fragile in these shows. They are. Yeah. And I know it's intentional. But it would be, and it ends up that the supporting characters are more interesting sometimes because they do have private lives. Like John Diggle on the Arrow, in some ways, is more interesting than the Arrow because he has a wife, he has a child, and he's doing this, even with those burdens, he's still doing that, and that makes him a more interesting character. There are no stakes for the Flash, who doesn't really have, I mean, yeah, he loves Iris, but if he disappeared, everybody's got superpowers. Everybody's getting superpowers left and right anyway. It wouldn't really. What would you be missing? And what stakes does he have? I don't think that the Flash has very heavy stakes. He's got Iris. He loves Joe and whatever, but he just doesn't feel like you have the same stakes as someone who has a family. Someone who has a family has higher stakes. They do the Magnificent Seven, right? I don't know if you ever saw that Magnificent Seven. Charles Bronson, Yul Brynner, and these guys are it's in the Wild West show, and this Mexican village is being overrun by bandits, and they're being harassed and being forced to pay money. And so they put together some money and go hire 7 Wild West fighters to come and protect their village. And at one point, and the thing you see about the farmers, because it's a farming village, is that they're kind of squirrely about everything. And the sons of the farmers are really losing respect. And one of the kids tells Charles Bronson, he says, my dad's a coward, I don't like him, yada yada. And he says, no, you can't say that about your dad. He said, your dad loves you, and he's doing all that he can to protect you. Your dad is much braver than I am. And I really like that element to it because it was true. The farmers were the real heroes. Their risk, what they risked, was so much greater than the people fighting the battles. And the only thing that the people fighting the battles had going for them was they were very flashy and very good at fighting battles. But the real heroes, the superheroes, in that sense, was a farming village. And I think sometimes maybe in the show, John Diggle is a greater hero than Oliver Queen is.
Yeah, he definitely shines through. You mentioning that jogs my memory on this interesting exchange in I don't know which comic it was. I think it could be Bendis, his recent run on Superman, or just a run before that. Either way, in the Superman comics, there was this fantastic conversation between Jonathan Kent and Clark Kent, Superman, when Superman takes John to
Jonathan Kent is his father or his son?
His son.
Okay.
Who also has superpowers. He takes him to a dump, a junkyard to train, and they have this amazing conversation where I think Jonathan asks him, like, why don't you just, you have the power to take over and run everything. You could be the president. You could be, ruler of the world. You could, nobody could stop you. You're so altruistic. You could do things right and solve a lot of problems. And Superman explains to him about humans having to have pain and suffering and challenge and to rise above and to overcome, and how he can't do everything for everybody. And it's certainly not his place to just take over. And he's a part of having so much power is having the responsibility to, adjudicate properly and to apply his power correctly. And just this father-son moment, Superman, Superboy moment, it was so philosophical. It was so powerful. And I just thought it was a great moment in comics where you're really getting into the character building and what a Superman is versus him just punching everything.
Right. There's violence doesn't tell you anything about a person other than they can punch well. And that is lacking a little bit too much in the TV shows and the comics, is that character development. And because comics doesn't want Superman to change, it's very rare that you get those glimpses and you get those honest conversations where it's thought out. It would be so much more interesting if they let these characters grow old and die. because then they're faced with, certain questions. A Batman should have about 10 years, I would assume, 10 to 15 years, and then he should retire or die or something like that, because I just don't think his body can handle it, unless he steals the magic healing ray from Paradise Island, which I would be a big fan of that happening. I think Bruce could pull it off somehow. But otherwise, Bruce always being Batman, he's not allowed to change. It was nice in the Chris Nolan Batman that he saved the city that one last time, and then he was oops. And then he went off and did his own thing. Hey, Cross Comics, how you doing, Rick? Nice to see you here in the show with us. We've got about 15 minutes left. We're talking about the Flash and the Arrow TV shows. So Rick is a friend of mine. We do a Genesis class together, and he's a Christian guy, and then I talk about the Jewish understanding of the scriptures and all that. So sorry, I think I didn't mean to distract you there. I just want to say hello to Rick.
No, just as a general kind of a recap, and
I can't hear you at all.
Oops.
Yeah, I can't hear you.
You can't hear myself?
You can hear me though, right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hey, Rick, can you hear Brian talk or no? That's weird.
I was just going to mention the fantastic Easter eggs, they call them in Arrow and Flash, like Impulse, calling him Wally, the little hop jump thing he does when he comes into a room.
Whatever you're saying seems extremely important. Do you have your mic off?
It's on.
It's weird. You say something now?
Okay.
Can
you hear this?
It's my it's wait.
Okay.
Try speaking now.
Okay. Just to recap on the Flash and the Arrow.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You know what it was? In my excitement, I turned my volume all the way down on my.
Oh, geez.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Yeah, go
just
ahead.
real quick,
Yeah,
just want to mention one fun thing where they call them Easter eggs. The kind of hidden little details within the Arrow and the Flash that they brought from the comics, like using Jesse Quick. One particular one I like is the composite of Impulse in the TV show Flash, calling him Wally. The little skip jump he did as he entered the room was very Impulse in the line of the character.
Right.
A lot of little things they dropped. Having Roy Harper calling his sister Speedy, the nickname, right. Kind of infusing, like I say, kind of at least tipping the hat to many different ideas. I liked the fact that they used Killer Frost in Flash. She appeared in a couple comics. She was a much more aggressive, misunderstood character. I don't think they handled her quite right, but certainly having that character was a good choice.
Well, if they'd make her more aggressive, like I don't know if it's the actress' fault. Someone told me that she acts in something else. I might turn that off because I've got you. There we go. Someone said they saw her in something else, and she actually was able to be more intimidating. So I don't know, but you look at her, and maybe it's just because they spent so long dealing with her as this nice, naive, cutesy girl, that's really hard to believe that she could ever pull off another personality where she's just evil, and she just becomes more like Grumpy Frost or something like that.
Right.
Instead of I haven't had my coffee yet, ice, and so I don't know, but the Easter eggs are nice because I actually don't mind the TV shows being different from the comics. In fact, I think it's great because you actually have some resolution sometimes. You have resolutions with some certain characters because you don't know how long you're going to have the character. The character might be leaving the show, and sometimes that forces them to try to do something a little bit more interesting. I did appreciate that they called her Speedy because they weren't going to call Roy Harper Speedy, which is unfortunate because that's more of a kid name, and Arsenal is a more impressive name. I just think that with Roy Harper they missed a huge opportunity, and that was I think because the actor had to step away for personal reasons for a little while. Okay. But they sorry, I just saw. Yeah, they messed up that opportunity because I felt like Roy Harper, they were setting him up to be an important part of the show for a little while, and then he ended up just after a season or so. There's almost a whole season of him, training and trying to fight in the streets and trying to train himself, and then finally seeing the light, and then having Oliver train him, and that it was. That there was so much potential with him, but then he just left the show suddenly, and I thought that was unfortunate. Rick writes, I think the problem with Killer Frost is they just made her MPD, a medical doctor. Is that what that means? MPD means medical doctor, or what does MPD mean? I don't know what that means. Can you see the chat, Brian?
I'm not looking at it right now.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you were looking at it or not. Maybe Rick will clue us in on that. But they missed an opportunity with Roy. I was disappointed with him really having no presence on the show after he left. I think he came back once or twice, but he wasn't as interesting as when he left. Mm-hmm. I don't know. What do you think? Let me ask you this question. Out of the two shows, which character do you think that they did the best with, and which one do you think they had the biggest missed opportunity with?
The best character, I feel like they encapsulated the tone and the tenor as I started out this with the Flash. I think with the suit and his kind of lightheartedness, the relationship with Iris, I think they got some of those things right. Mm-hmm. And the Flash's, his mother being killed and him wanting to become a CSI, kind of to push him in that direction. I think they got a lot of that. They're right. It felt like a Flash show for me. Oh, multiple personality. Yeah, right. Absolutely. Yeah. But I certainly think I think the Black Canary, like you were mentioning earlier, they really missed that on the Arrow. I think that she's such a quintessential element of the Green Arrow series as a comic, and even in the DC universe. That not having her as a stable, strong character, I think, is just a missed opportunity for. I mean, I want to say for women in general, of having a strong, heroine who is able to, like you said, to match anyone in hand-to-hand combat, and she even had some of a power in that she could have that canary scream, but it was certainly a missed character. I think they danced around the topic. They created versions of that, but I think they never really embraced that idea. And that's certainly a missed opportunity in the Flash universe, or the Arrowverse. I mean,
right. And I think Vibe, they did it. I never liked Vibe in the comics. I thought he was just like a throwaway character, honestly. He wasn't that interesting. But when they introduced Cisco and they made Cisco an interesting character in and of himself, and then Cisco became Vibe, that was a lot more interesting, and I really appreciate it. And his powers, I think, are different too. I think Vibe did more like earthquakes or something, but they changed his powers in the show.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah. Vibe came a little bit later in comics. I think it was around the New 52
80s.
time. Yeah.
Well, maybe Vibe originally was an 80s character added to the Justice League. He and Gypsy were both new additions to the Justice League. I think they're trying to diversify the Justice League a little bit.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah, he just wasn't interested. He was Black Lightning I liked a lot. Cyborg was probably the best new character they brought on board. The Justice League. I really liked him, and I think they introduced him in like the Super Friends show or Superpower show, along with Firestorm.
Nice.
And the thing with Killer Frost, I think in the comics, Killer Frost also had a relationship with Firestorm. I know they fought in the Firestorm comic, and I wish they hadn't killed that guy off. I don't know why they brought him in for like a couple of episodes and then killed him off.
I like the Firestorm. Professor Stein, that was great. Firestorm was awesome.
Yeah, the second one I didn't like Jackson, the second Firestorm, as much. He just I don't know, the actor just wasn't that interesting. But anyway, hey, we got about 4 minutes left. I want to know, do you have a suggested reading?
Oh man, I got all kinds of things.
Now this is here at the end. We one of the things that we enjoy about comics is sort of like the sort of values that comics have had universally, and so sometimes we'll make suggested readings, not necessarily of comics, maybe sometimes comics, but also sometimes, but also maybe an interesting article or book or something like that to help spur your imagination and to connect you with something. So. Do you have a suggestion, or I've got about 4 or 5. If you don't have one this week, I have.
No, you can go forward. I have nothing off the top of my head right now.
If you want to watch have an interesting lecture, then there's a person named Lawrence Kellerman who wrote a book, two books that he's famous for: Permission to Believe and Permission to Receive. And these books cover why you should, one, believe in God, and second, why you should believe in the oral tradition. And
I was just thinking, I was going to mention Kellerman. It's so funny.
Great.
He's simple to remember.
Right, simpletomemember.com. He's got a great book on child to nurture something, a soul, but to kindle a soul. But he has an audio where he sums up his Permission to Believe book. He does a very entertaining lecture on simpletomemember.com, and it's about the what is it called? It's called a rational basis for the belief in God or something like that. Just look for Kellerman. You can listen to any of his classes. They're extremely entertaining. They're very interesting, and that would be my suggestion for this week.
Real quick in the comic world, so a guy named Ron Mars has been a nice writer in comics. He wrote both Green Lantern and Silver Surfer. They recently just gave him back the Silver Surfer title for a miniseries. I believe it's going to be 5 books. I just picked up the first issue. Haven't read it. I'm super pumped. They brought back one of the original artists, Ron Lim, with the.
Oh, I remember him. I loved his stuff.
Yeah, so we have Ron Lim and Ron Mars together once again, redoing Silver Surfer for another go at it. Miniseries. Super pumped about that. It may fly or may die, but either way, it's worth a look. So that's one comic suggestion.
Okay. Ron Lim was a great artist. I think he was late 90s, wasn't he? That's when he was big in Silver Surfers, late 90s.
Yes, sir. Great stuff.
Yeah. He was great. And I just want to point out that Rick says that Vibe is similar in powers in the comics and the show. I guess I don't remember him very well then. And that Killer Frost is the arch enemy of Firestorm. And I knew that because of the Firestorm comic, like the old one, like the original, I think started like in the 70s or early 80s. But I could have sworn that at some point in time, Killer Frost and Firestorm developed a romantic connection. But she was very anti-men. That was one of her things. I think they they made her sort of a crazy feminist or something in
Right.
the comic. I didn't read a lot of Killer Frost. I was impressed. I think she was wearing like her wedding dress or something. That was her costume. I don't know. I have a lot of vague memories about Killer Frost, but I thought she was more interesting in the comic, and than she has been on TV. I think if they left Caitlin as Caitlin, that would have been fine. But trying to make Caitlin Killer Frost, it just never has worked for me. Well, guys, that's it. It's 10 o'clock. Or here, and it's 3 o'clock there in Michigan. And that's going to be it. So I hope you enjoyed this. This is Overthinking Comics. I'm Hillel from New Hero Comics, and with me is Brian. And great discussion. I really enjoyed it. Apparently we both had a lot to say about Flash and Green Arrow. And so we'll see you guys next year in the New 52. We'll see you next Thursday, not next year, next Thursday. We'll see you guys same time, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or 9 p.m. if you're in Israel. And have a great week, everybody. Shabbat Shalom.